watching Speak Up, and we are focusing on whether the wave of professionals entering politics is here to stay and what can they really do. Before I go to my guests, Meera Sanyal, Mallika Sarabhai and Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Rajeev, if I can come to you, idealism aside, how tough is it to fight a Lok Sabha election as an independent candidate?
No, I think it is difficult. I think for somebody like me who's been in Rajya Sabha, which is obviously a degree of far easier process to in terms of elections, I find myself constrained and challenging to function as an independent member of parliament. So I think it will be a challenge. It will be difficult, but then I think people like Mallika and Meera probably understand that this is not going to be just a walk in the park, and it's not just about espousing a few ideas and getting people to support you.
Right.
There's a lot of other effort required.
Right. But there are two problems, Rajeev, of being an independent, or for anyone who is an independent taking on an entire party machinery. First is, how do you stand for elections against a system and a well-oiled machinery? And the second is that do you have a voice in parliament if you stand alone? Let's go with the first one first. How difficult is it to fight an election on the ground?
Look, I think the model that Meera and Mallika and yesterday Captain Gopinath are attempting to do is new pioneering path in a lot of ways. I think this is untested territory, uncharted territory in a lot of ways. So one thing I think they all can safely assume that this is not going to be easy. But having said that, I mean, unless you try, you will not know whether this thing pans out and people are successful. So I think the fact that they're doing it is good. The results and the outcomes of what they are attempting is clearly a question mark at this stage. But that ought not to deter them from putting a serious effort in making a mark and creating for themselves a space in this whole debate.
Right, it is going to be a long-drawn process, Rajeev. But as a lone voice, can you push through change or in Parliament once you reach there? Or over time, do you just have to align with one formation or the other in the current scenario?
Look, I think, Mini, this is the important question. I think I have learned after 3 years of being an independent member of Parliament that what being an independent member of Parliament allows you to do is to raise a voice of dissent. And I think that comes very easily from being independent. You are not aligned to any party, so therefore running a contrary line or taking a contrary position to the mainstream status quo establishment is easier for an independent. However, the contra of that is not as easy, which is if you want to make change happen and you want to effectively get things done, then being an independent is actually a liability. And in a lot of ways, you may have the right idea, you may have the right solution, but being an independent puts you in a position of being a lone voice in a crowd. And that is good, like I said, to be a voice of dissent, but to be a constructive voice of change and to effect change becomes very, very difficult for an independent.
How have you dealt with the problem? What would your advice be for Mallika and Meera in case they do make it to the Parliament?
No, I think they ought to fight hard, and I think they ought to try their best to win. And at the very least, clearly make their points and their issues part of the mainstream political debate and agenda. If they win and when they win, and it is going to happen. One of these days, this glass ceiling is going to be broken and independents are going to get voted in to Parliament. If they get into Parliament, I think the objective ought to be not to take pride in being different alone, but to figure out a way of making the mainstream political parties get aligned to their voice of change and this different point of view. Because at the end of the day, politics is about numbers, legislation is about the majority, and unless you either align to the majority or get the majority aligned to your point of view, then it becomes a futile exercise. So I think if you do get elected, the real challenge is to either get the majority to listen to you and to agree to you, or in some sense create a middle path between yourself and the existing majority political view.
Rajeev, getting back to the Rajya Sabha and your stint there, you were one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country when you decided to jump into politics. Looking back, was it worth it, considering the fight that you would have to take on every time you want to push an agenda?
No, I am very committed to it. I have enjoyed it. I have, I continue to enjoy every day that I go to Parliament and I'm part of the process. But it is important to understand that in the early days, I did face considerable skepticism, of the form that you hear, which is, oh, one more businessman in politics. He's out there for a particular agenda to further his own agenda. So you will face that kind of skepticism, regardless of how clear-headed and how honorable your views are. So that is part of the resistance you get from the system. The point that, for example, Malika and Meera will clearly face this issue of, oh, these are people coming in from the outside and, trying to make a mark in politics. And they will be subjected to skepticism, cynicism, and all of the usual things that the political class will throw at people who are trying to break into the system.